Hi everyone! My end of the semester paper is talking about one-handed piano literature. I specifically chose to do this because I was a student that broke my wrist as a 14-year-old and was devastated that I wasn't able to play for a little while. And I believe that having musically satisfying resources during that time can be a very big encouragement to musicians who are only able to play with one hand for a short time. My one caveat is this is not designed as a band-aid solution for any long-term injuries, especially if it's a repetitive stress injury from playing. This is just if you want your student to focus on repertoire that uses only one hand for a specific period of time. This is also useful if you have a student that really needs to focus on left-hand technique or reading in the bass clef. Here are some references. These guides are compilations of different one-handed musics. I especially appreciated Donald Patterson's One-Handed, A Guide to Piano Music for One Hand, because it has a P next to the pieces that are more pedagogical in nature, rather than just concert repertoire. So these repertoire collections are specifically designed for one-handed pianists. This one by Barbara Arnes, One-Handed Piano, 40 pieces for left or right, has a great range of pieces from early elementary to early advanced. There are some arrangements of familiar tunes as well as original pieces. These pieces can be played with either hand and there's fingerings for both hands. Melody Bober has grand one-hand solos for piano, and she has 6 books, each of which is progressively more difficult. Each book has pieces for right hand only and left hand only. They are all original Bober pieces, and they are digitally available, which is really helpful during the social distancing time. It's also easy to get and to ask your students to purchase, which is helpful. This one by Raymond Loewenthal, Piano Music for One Hand, a collection of studies, exercises, and pieces, is a collection of advanced repertoire pieces. This would be difficult to find some of these pieces outside of this collection because they are still under copyright, and many of them are difficult to find just in general because they're a little bit obscure, being for one hand. But these are all original repertoire that would be useful. It's just at an advanced level. So some challenges that are specific to one-handed literature is the fact you're trying to decide the fingering and the range. If it's written for one hand only, specifically left hand, can the right hand play that one? It's important to consider the range. Will it be too difficult for the right hand to play down that low? If you're teaching this to a student, you'll have to rewrite the fingering. And also consider the voicing. So if the voicing is such where you're really using your ulna power and your 5th finger to bring out those low bass notes, that might be difficult to transfer over to the right hand. If it's more in the middle range of the keyboard, you should be able to switch out hands pretty easily. One-handed literature tends to have fast movement across a wide range of the keyboard. So in the Deal and Worston Adaptive Strategies for Small-Handed Pianists, they talk about oval movements for slower legato passages, and then fan movements where your elbow is in one position and your arm rotates for large leaps. And you can have some mild torso adjustments if your torso needs to get out of the way so that you can move across large spans easily. Also, even if you are not a small-handed pianist, if you are playing one-handed literature, that will probably mean that you will be playing in extreme registers within that hand. So that makes the hand position feel smaller. So it's important to consider new fingering that will keep your hand in a relaxed position as it travels across extreme ranges. And remember that you can use passive hand stretch in contrapuntal passages if you're trying to avoid using the pedal. Thick textures You can divide some of the chord before the beat, release the notes as needed, especially if you're trying to emphasize other melodic lines. Use your sustain pedal liberally as long as it's musically appropriate, and your sostenuto pedal is very helpful. So for the remainder of this presentation, I will be talking about one piece from each of the four main eras for piano literature: Baroque, Classical, Romantic, and Contemporary. And I have a piece that is emblematic of that era that was composed by a composer during that time for one hand. And these pieces will range in difficulty from early, intermediate, up through advanced, but they do not go into the concert repertoire only level. One caveat with these levels is levels are all based on the McGrath textbook, but when you have only one hand playing it, that increases the difficulty because you aren't able to distribute notes and things. So every level that I have listed here were levels that I felt like corresponded best with the musical texture and difficulties, but it is more difficult with one hand. So this is the Gavotte in E major. This is from the violin sonata, the sixth one. I decided to include this even though it is a transcription because Raphael Josephi has just transcribed it for left hand alone. It's a pianistic transcription and is very accurate to the original sonata for violin. I've listed this one at a level 8, maybe 9 because of one hand, because there are difficult ornaments, thicker textures and chords, and also it reinforces some of the level 7 counterpoint of needing to project complex counterpoint and fast registral shifts. One of the main challenges with this one is the large chords. Ideas are to revoice or eliminate octaves in some of the large chords. You can use pedaling as needed to help you move to the next chord. You'll just have to be careful to make it not too blurry of the harmonies. And then you can roll chords or divide chords if it's stylistically appropriate. For classical, we have C.P.E. Bach, Klavierstück für die rechte oder linke Hand allen. And this is a level 6. It has some quick changes of harmony, it's a fast tempo, and it reinforces some of the level 7 concepts of more complex counterpoint and articulation, and there are large leaps in one hand. Also, it's a dance form. Because it's a jig tempo, using that fan arm motion for fast leaps will be very useful. And you'll want to teach your students to have a stable torso so that the arm movement is not too chaotic. For romantic, we have Cesson, Six Etudes pour le Main Gauche, number 1 prelude. And in this one, I've labeled it as level 7 because of the fast scales and the projection of complex counterpoint and the fast registoral shifts. It reinforces some of the level 6 concepts of double thirds and sixths, but they are more tricky. There's some more complex patterns. Some of the challenges with this piece: the rapid arpeggios and scale passages. I would suggest using an oval wrist movement, and fingering that allows for more passive hand positions as you're moving across the keyboard. Also, consider using the sostenuto pedal to sustain some of the half notes without blurring all of the staccatos. For contemporary, we have Prelude for the Left Hand, Opus 9. There is also a nocturne in this opus, but the nocturne was considerably more difficult. I placed this at a level 8 or 9. It has thick textures and it requires some sophisticated pedaling. Again, with all of the one-handed pieces, it has fast registoral shifts. This piece requires a lot of musical sophistication. There are times where the notation suggests that notes should be played simultaneously, but they're quite removed from each other on the keyboard. So you have to make some musical decisions about how to divide some of the chords. Perhaps you play some of those before the beat. You can also use your sustain and sostenuto pedals as well. in making these decisions, it's important to decide which melodic line you want to emphasize at which points. In conclusion, I believe that these pieces provide valuable learning opportunities for students to learn important interpretive and technical skills that can be reapplied to two-handed literature. I also believe that these pieces reaffirm the musicality of differently abled pianists, as many of these compositions were composed for concert pianists who were unable to perform with both hands. And I believe that these pieces are a valuable contribution to the overall pedagogy.